So thank you and good afternoon and welcome to the Boom Symposium and welcome to the panel on technology, power, community and alternative futures. This panel will take a form of short 15 minutes presentations and panel discussion afterwards. The panel will offer some insights into the technologies as a means of imagining a future beyond the bleak prospect offered by the status quo we see around us. The speakers, which today are Mary C., Andreas, Dzialocha, Moisés, Horta, Valenzuela, and Márton, Bertók, which is here instead of the Guripal, or in the civil name Parl Christian Bjorn Wester, came here from different backgrounds, and we will all discuss everything from the structures to unconventional technological approaches to community building to initiative aimed at empowering the people on the margins of our societies. Before I will leave the floor to the panelists, I would like to briefly introduce them. Mary C., or Marie Čtveračková, is a musician, curator, lecturer, and music journalist. Mary is a co-founder of the Prague-based collective Zvuk and Synth Library Prague, a space for sharing, creating, discussing, and experimenting in the field of electronic music. Together with Martin Tvrdý, they created a platform Creaton for organizing workshops and lectures on electronic music for children and grown-ups. As a curator of music educational events, Mary C. worked with the Goethe Institute on the Music Port series, with Acropolis Palace and the No One Future Festival, with Meat Factory and the Shape platform on the international educational meeting Synapse. Within Synth Library Prague, Mary C. formed the Trigger Collective of women, non-binary and trans musicians, which also published a magazine and radio show of the same name. In her activities, she deals with the diversity and representation of the unheard voices in the music scene and in the field of music technology. She has been a guest lecturer at the Charles University, the Heroines of Sound Festival in Berlin, Construction in Dieper, Men in Ljubljana, and Electric Spring in Vienna. As a music journalist, her main focus is on African American music and its social context. Our other panelist is Andreas Dzialocha, bass player, composer, developer, and producer. The work and practice of Berlin-based Andreas Dzialocha fluidly moves between the digital and physical worlds, where he creates spaces, festivals, softwares, music labels, magazines, and platforms for imagining alternative futures, sharing, listening, learning, and networking. What connects Andreas' works is the computer, which is understood here as a medium for political, philosophical, social, and artistic, and as a tool for decentralized networks. Some of his projects are P2Panda, user-friendly peer-to-peer communication protocol, Hyperdelia, music label that experiments with studio production, virtuality, and recorded music, magazine platform Blood 300, Hoffnung 3000, an alternative platform for collective action. Andrea studied art history, musicology, media, philosophy, and computer science, and together with Gönnel von Lilian Stern is leading a seminar on work with sound and artificial intelligence at UDK in Berlin. Other panelist is Moisés Horta Valenzuela. He's a sound artist, musician, composer, and performer. His work lies in the field of computer music, artificial intelligence, and the history of politics of digital technologies. Thematically, Moisés attempts to disrupt the juxtapositions between utopia and dystopia, folk tradition, and capitalist modernity. Under the pseudonym Hexorcismos, he creates new connections between ancient and modern sound technologies in the form of deep neural networks, pre-Hispanic sound artifacts, do-it-yourself electronic instruments, and wearable computer interfaces to address the issues of colonizations, occupation, and contemporary alchemy. And the panel should be originally opened by a keynote lecture by Paul Christian Bjorn Wester, alias Gudipal, musician and composer, self-proclaimed the Aarhus warrior, whose works and creation influenced the course of modern music through radical excursion into computer technology and media art. Gudipal couldn't come because the prices of his train tickets has gone up too tremendously. Instead of that, he sent a letter that you can see behind me, something between a statement and a recommendation of what and how to discuss. As he said in the documentary, the Kudipal equation, now we'll quote, mapping his life and artistic practice, to be him is a very hard job because you have to be hated on a daily basis. You have to take a lot of hate. I grew up on sugar and hate. That was my diet when I was young. Somebody has to take care of all the knowledge when the dark times come. Unfortunately, I must say that I don't feel very comfortable to making some comments on this letter, but I have the feeling that it's needed to be done. Unfortunately, the dark times are here, and we are facing them on an everyday basis of our reality. And and here in this Kudipal's letter, written in some way of pretty mansplaining language, we can read pearls of wisdom such, Alexander Dugin was right, but that does not make him right. And here we are talking about the Putin ideologies, guy that wrote that sovereignty of Ukraine represents such a negative phenomenon for Russian geopolitics that it can, in principle, easily provoke a military conflict. Ukraine, as an independent state, constitutes an enormous threat to the whole Eurasia. And we all know how this kind of thinking is ending. Or another wisdom from the letter suggests, do not hate the aggressor of any conflicts as they are just as bad as yourself. Or in most conflicts, go spiritual. I feel this is kind of cringe at the time when on everyday basis we hear about new mass graves filled with tortured and raped bodies. And sorry for being personal here, but these kind of statements in the current age are just wrong in many ways. Go spiritual is a sign of ignorance. Everyone for themselves. To care, to wish for a good time, or to be interested in each other is here only formality, some sign to fulfill some protocol. Anyway, let's go back to the panel. Kudipal was supposed to start with the presentation, and he's not here, but his place will be taken by the graphic designer and musician Márton Bertók. And at this point, I would like to leave the floor to Márton, and thank you for being here with us today.
Hi, thank you. So, it would probably be a good idea to talk about how I've ended up on this stage. It's kind of a topic about technology, power, communities, and alternative futures, although perhaps not directly. As Ján have mentioned, I'm here in the place of Kudipal, who was supposed to give a lecture today. I first met Kudipal in 2015 at UH Fest in Budapest, where he was playing. He has brought an EMS synthesizer and asked for a laptop, which I provided for him. He then proceeded to play various YouTube videos of his and his friends' music through the synth, pausing every few minutes for a few words to the audience. This was something that I have not seen before. He has brought a levity to a scene which often seems to take itself a bit too seriously. And even though his act was by far the funniest concert I've ever seen, it never became a clown show. His comments, and in fact the whole premise of playing YouTube, were poking gently at the whole idea of experimental music concerts with thousands of euros of gear, but delivered in a completely sincere and affectionate way. In 2017, he was back in Budapest for the screening of the documentary about him. At that time, I was becoming increasingly disillusioned with experimental music, and what the late Mark Fisher called experimental TM, which is actually well-established genres with their own niche markets, which have no relation to the mainstream. It had become predictable, co-opted, and incorporated into the logic of capitalism. In stark contrast, the Kudipal documentary was like a breath of fresh air. After the screening, we've kept loosely in touch until I found out about the restoration of a legendary EMS Synthi 100 in Belgrade. where Goodipal was living at that time. Knowing his love for the smaller Synthi, I've suggested that he should check it out. Instead, he has generously invited me to take his place in Belgrade, and suggested that we should do it together. So in 2018, I visited him in Belgrade, where he was living, in order to give direct help to refugees. The way he did this was seemingly very disorganized. He would walk up to random refugees in the Belgrade Park and ask them if they needed any help. He has set up an unofficial refugee shelter in his Belgrade home, where anyone could stay for a few weeks. He would also help them get food, clothes, medicine, and information about getting through the border. It was as if he had taken the usual bad faith argument, which goes something like, if you like migrants so much, why don't you accept them in their home? Which is a question I've often heard in Hungary, and completely demolished it by doing just that. As for the Synthi 100, we ended up spending a few days at Radio Belgrade and messed around with the synthesizer, which was big enough to fill a room. I had never thought about doing anything with the sounds that we've recorded there. I was just happy to play on a piece of synth history. To my surprise, about a year later, a box of 50 vinyl records were delivered to my doorstep. On one side, he explained there were snippets of the work we did at Radio Belgrade. On the other side, there was another friend of Goodipal who had made some very bizarre set of tracks, including a recording of someone saying Heil Hitler over and over again, ran through different presets of a multi-effect rec unit. I have no idea why, and why he's chosen to put these two sides together, but as Goodipal tells me, confusion is good. By the way, I have some records over here. If you like them, they are for free, but you have to give something in return. It doesn't have to be money. It could also be like a poem or a doodle or anything. The last time he was in Budapest, he had asked me to organize a concert for him and his collective called Goodipal and Pals at the local cafe Lumen, a space that's very similar to this one. Unfortunately, he himself couldn't make it, but the Pals did the concert nonetheless. At certain times during the performance, he would call up one of the Pals on their cell phone and give instructions, usually involving giving the phone to an audience member who would act as a relay. It was a strange moment of fluxus and uncertainty. A few days ago, he has contacted me to ask me to come on his panel discussion in his place. Again, I have no idea why, considering I have zero experience as a panel speaker and next to no qualifications for being here. As usual, it was impossible to get anything concrete out of him. I'm not sure what the moral of the story is, but maybe it's about how in order to step outside the system just a little bit, you need some chaos and confusion. I see Goodipal's praxis as one of the few truly radical acts possible in art today, gently pushing at the foundations of structures to see if they crumble. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would like to invite Mary C.
Dobrý den všem. Hi everyone. I got slowly very uncomfortable during this first part of the thing, but I realized throughout my life I got comfortable with weird guys approaching with weird things, but it also reminded me that one of our mottos when we work with kids is chaos and intuition. So we'll see what goes out of this all. And
I'm just very confused with Windows computers.
oh, sorry, I made you do it. So that's fine. We can continue like that. I bet you all know the environment in the computer, so we don't have to play that like it's it's not there. So thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you very much for the chance to talk about some topics that are very important for me and have also a physical impact on me most of the time. And that's why I also am trying to start discussions around these topics, not only at the Synth Library, but also what I'm going to talk about today is the basis of the synth library. So I just want to ask you for the start, what do you see at these pictures? And maybe some of you would say it's people playing synths or people playing with some cables, but some people would say this is a political statement, and some people even would say this is sexism, and this is something that we deal with very often. These are people that I started a collective of women and non-binary people in electronic music and sound at the Synth Library in Prague. It's called Trigger. So maybe the next slide. Even this picture can be, for some people, weirdly uncomfortable because there are books about women in electronic music and sound. So maybe the next picture. I will just open my notes so I'm focusing better. And yes, and the trigger started with some of these questions that we often see around us, and I was asking why are my favorite artists still told that they don't exist, and how come I do see them, and how come I do hear them. Why is it so easy to invite white men all the time, and why is it so tempting and easy for the curators to do it all the time, even though the women and non-binary people in music and sound existed and exist and do amazing stuff. So these women are waiting for you to realize that they exist. And a lot of and I grew up having a classical musical education, and I heard almost about no woman being a composer or a conductor, even though later I found out there are a lot of them. So maybe the next one. And this is me with the question trying to hallucinate about these topics on another event. This is what the magazine looked like. I have one copy if you're interested. This is the Trigger magazine that we published, and that was full of interviews with women and people working in sound, and it was full of profiles of women from the history of electronic music. So the next one. And that's we tried to supply some information. We tried to bring some information that we missed in the media and even in the textbooks. The next one. And this is what it looks like at the Synth Library, because we realized that, of course, we see what we value, and we see based on the cultural stereotypes and traditions, education, habits. And we started the Synth Library with the need to come together with people that are often marginalized but are important part of the music and sound world. And we wanted to provide access to something that is reserved just for some still. I know democratization, of course, and all the bedroom producing, but still this is just for some, and some are missing. Some don't have the access, something it is not for them or too complicated. Some try it and face violence, verbal or physical. Even what we are dealing with is a structural problem. It's a huge thing that is not just a one-off thing that you experience at a club with one sound guy. It's a structural thing. And the structural problem has an impact on what we are dealing with in music, what kind of music we make, what kind of people we hear, what kind of people we meet in the club, if we just look around in the room. And I say the question that we often ask, who's in the room? There's a lot of people missing that could be here, but for many reasons are not here. So, and even I can be asking what kind of people have access to healthcare or education in general. And these are very important questions we ask, and our practice is of course informed by the answer. And the next one, actually don't call them lady Composers was a title of an essay by Pauline Oliveros, a sound artist, a philosopher, a lecturer, someone who really inspired us when we started the Synth Library, and someone who was talking about that women are put down by being called lady producers. You produce these, or like composers, you compose these ladies things that are, of course, much less than what the geniuses, white guys, produce or compose. And it's quite sad to see. We can be talking about the music scene, but if we look around, it's not just being marginalized on a music scene, but losing some basic rights like bodily autonomy, or like having the right to decide about our bodies, which is very alarming and sad to me. And our motto at the Synth Library is no silencing, deep listening, all shapes and colors trigger change. The next one, this is Pauline Oliveros with her ensemble, and the next one, you'll see the motto or also in Czech. So what is important for us is, of course, a social change or some kind of transformation. The next one is in English, and the next one. Here are just, to be honest, I quite hate the stats, but it is still necessary to bring some facts and some numbers, because it's funny that whenever I talk about these topics, someone would just say, oh, well, I think it's not true, and it's usually guys. So I found out during my practice as a musician and music journalist that I will have to pile up a lot of facts and arguments to show people that it's really an issue, and some people are being not just pushed away from instruments and scenes, but some people are really pushed or physically harmed. And so this is the situation still, and probably some of you know that Female Pressure Collective was started more than 20 years ago, and I was inspired by these women, and I'm much younger than them, and still we are dealing with very similar issues they were dealing with. But of course, there have been some change thanks to people that were involved in this and talked about this. And yeah, the next one, maybe just one, because I'm also, I picked just one side or one structural problem. I picked something that is personal for me, so I'm talking for myself as well. But you can see that there are more problems, and as a music journalist, I see around that most people, there's a lot of racism on the music scene, not only on the Czech scene, but there's still so many people that don't appreciate the foundations of electronic music being contributed by Black gay community or Black queer community. So it's important to talk about these things. And just yesterday we had a talk about sampling. So there's still so many stereotypes and so many taboos as well that we need to talk about. And even though it might not be very comfortable. And the next one is just few words that are important for us, including improvisation and including the access. The sound is for everyone. The sound should be accessible. The sound is around us, should be for everyone. Empowerment, liberation. Of course, the first one is the collaboration, access, sharing, discussion, learning and unlearning, improvisation, some kind of sensitivity and stuff like that. And these are questions and these are challenges. These are things that are not closed, not answers. It's a challenge. And this is what we still try to discuss with as many people as we can at the Synth library, and to collaborate on some change or transformation together. So I hope we're going to continue then in the discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you too.
Hello. Also my brain is also very full of many things. I want to talk about partly about my work, but also partly about other people's work. Initially, the topic, the topic of the symposium is about technology as well, and about power. And this is something which we reflected upon on many layers today. I had the feeling, like we talked a lot about power relationships, which are so present in our groups and collectives we are part of, but also in our daily lives, just as individuals, constantly facing certain struggles, certain power dynamics. And I just maybe in this particular talk want to focus a little bit on technology, and what sort of there's definitely all the same struggles entailed in that, and I want to maybe have a little bit different angle from another perspective, which is maybe more pragmatic, because we have like tools as collectives, as groups, to deal with these things, to shield ourselves from the from the outside. We have different strategies to deal with the vulnerabilities we carry with us, and we learn and develop them all the time in dialogue. But the same is also happening with technology, and there is, I think, still lots of space especially for collectives, to involve this in their practice. So I just want to give some examples. And I took some notes here, and I shouldn't look at them too much, because then I get confused. But yeah, I try to give it a title. The title is maybe form fiction. I somehow thought about it a little bit, like what is the overarching name for all of this? And I think it's quite interesting, maybe form fiction. Because we talk a lot about content, of course, like what contents do we deliver, what is the content of the festival, what is the program, who are the artists in the roster, what's the lineup, who is headlining, who is on my label. But there's not so much talking about form, like what are the politics governing that system, like what are the thresholds for us to enter the system. And this is kind of, I find it interesting to shift the focus on this, also especially in terms of digital infrastructure. And the fictional part maybe it's very experimental to play with form. Like we can also think about other ways to organize through technology. And that might also then lead to different outcomes, different realities, which might be maybe not worthwhile, but it was worth trying it out. Maybe that also from your collective practices, you might, you probably have protocols of organizing your spaces, your groups. You're trying things out, they might not have worked out, and then you discuss that and change your protocols and then evolve. And I think this is like also the experimental spirit I want to emphasize in this. I just saw on Goody Pelt's letter, we can go next. We should talk about Documenta. So I want to talk about Documenta. yeah, there's lots to say about Documenta, but I think what is really interesting is the digital infrastructure they chose to organize. I mean, it's Documenta created like an experience which I think is very interesting. It was like, as a visitor, you were challenged and you needed to orientate yourself. You needed to find your own position in this mess. And the mess was complicated in many, many different regards. And this is maybe a very different perception you have from going to an art exhibition usually. You go to an art exhibition, there's an object, you look at this object, and then you go home. It's nicely presented for you. Similar to a music festival you go to, there's a lineup, there's a program. You just have to come drink a beer and go home. Documenta was different. Documenta was a struggle, but I think in a positive way. And I think the struggle for me also comes from, metaphorically maybe, from turning interfaces from the inside to the outside. So maybe to jump a little bit into technology, like when we look at the interfaces we're using daily, like the typical platforms, you have an interface, it was given to you, you never asked for it. It was just given to us, put in our faces, and we have to deal with it. It's like, I don't know, Mac OS comes up with a new operating system, iOS, Facebook has a new design, like these are interfaces we just like get pushed in our faces and we just accept it and we scroll down, click the buttons they have for us. And what I mean with turning that inside out is like, what if we could hack these interfaces? So what if we can actually change the interfaces which are given to us? And that's a very, very normal reality for programmers or hackers. This is their mindset. They want to break things apart. Not to destroy them, but actually to really like try something else, put the button in a different position, change the color, and build an instrument out of it. I think what we saw in Documenta was this sort of hacking, but with the framework of exhibiting, the framework of curating, the framework of communities and collectives. I think this was a hack, and it turned the things from the inside to the outside, and we were confronted with that. And because interfaces can be very pleasing. I mean, we know this thing. Like we all use Apple computers because we're professional musicians, and of course my Ableton needs to run super well, and I can't afford like running on Linux because everything is so unstable and the driver doesn't work. Interfaces are comfortable. Of course, we don't want to struggle every day with maintenance and infrastructure and all of these things. But then again, I don't know, like it's also kind of important. Maybe that struggle is important, and maybe that struggle Documenta went through in a way was or is important. So yeah, I mean, just looking at their page, like maybe go to the next slide. This is only a part of the navigation. We can see it has lots of like different sorts of like areas. There's the harvest, there's a calendar, there's a TV, there's a social platform. You can scroll down, there's even more, there's books. All of this is self-hosted infrastructure. So each of these links like link to like another platform. They are hosting themselves on their own servers. And some of these technologies you might heard of, like they use Nextcloud to upload their files. They use WordPress as a blog. Different things. One thing in particular I found really nice is it's just like the book library. You like every PDF which circulated around during Documenta, people could just upload there, and everyone else could just download it. You should check it out. It's a very beautiful library. What is also interesting with this platform is there's a private part to it. Not everything is like public. There's a whole social media platform based on the Fediverse, Mastodon. Just for the artists participating on Documenta. So they have their own social media network, completely disconnected from Instagram or Facebook. I don't have access to this. It's just for them. I think this is also really an interesting aspect. Like the infrastructures they created, it was not for the public. They created it for themselves, for these people. Yeah. Let me see if I. There's another cool thing. Funk Whale they used. Funk Whale is like Spotify, but you host it yourself. So you just upload files, MP3s, WAV files, and then you have it like on. You have the files on a hard disk on your server, and it federates with other people also having an instance. So you get access to each other's like music archives. This was their way of sharing music across the festival with the artists. Very nice interface. It looks like Spotify, but it's just, completely different politics. This is one of my favorite things as well. This is their like YouTube channel. Really interesting content. I can also recommend just like watching some of these videos. So much content, so many videos. But you see, it's like not hosted on YouTube. This is like a really cool, like properly looking video player, but it's actually running on PeerTube. PeerTube is also a peer-to-peer protocol, like kind of like BitTorrent with live streaming. So you can stream videos from the peer-to-peer network directly onto your computer. They have their own node hosted, like also like tv.lumbung.space, I guess. Cool, super cool. Like what I like about it is it's something I can feel going to Documenta. It's something I can see in the representation of the people, in the ways they talk, and in the digital infrastructure. I want to highlight that. It's like there's always this thinking that technology solves your problems, that as soon as you have like X, then you're gonna have, something cooler, or you have more possibilities or more features. It's not about this. It's like more one layer of how we want to organize. And another cool thing to highlight here is they didn't choose one technology, they chose 20 different ones, and it's a wild mix of them. And that shows also in the design and in the aesthetics of it. And this is just Co-op Cloud. Maybe like just to mentioning, it's like it's a cooperative. They provide tools to set up self-hosted infrastructure for collectives. They're also really happy to help with setting up infrastructure. First of all, they have a very nice software which makes that process very easy, and then on top they are also just very nice people. They were helping out with setting up the Documenta infrastructure next to many other people. Just some pictures. I jump a little bit. That's another project I've been part of with Laura, Malte, and Sam. It's like all friends. We all used to live in Berlin at one point, and we were building this platform called Hoffnung 3000. And Hoffnung 3000 was coming from many years of discussion on how we organize ourselves, coming kind of from DIY, noise, free improv, music communities. Like this it's interesting, like these communities are already self-organized, they are already decentralized, they already do everything themselves. And then on top, you're putting a platform on it. It's kind of funny, like why would you do that? And again, I see it from this perspective of form fiction. It's like, it's an experiment. We want to learn, we want to try something out. I don't see this as an ideal solution, like this solution, it will save all our problems, solve all our problems. It's really like an experimental mode. So we built that platform. You create locations. A location can be your apartment, your rehearsal studio, the club you own, the church you have access to, or your favorite space in the park, like a GPS position. You can bring resources like my printer, my instruments, my PA system. And then everyone else who participates in the festival can use both of that to program their regarding events. So it's completely self-organized. There's no curatorial mode. Everything is processed through this interface. And that was already interesting. Like, what is this interface? Why does it need to look? Why do we need these sorts of like features? What do they do to us? That was a very interesting mode of making a festival. We did it twice. First time in 2016, Verantwortung 3000, that was on a farm outside of Berlin, and then second time we did it inside of the city, that was Hoffnung 3000 in 2017. And at no point at this time we knew what was going on. It was very interesting, like it was completely out of control. And that was very nice, also for the audience. Also, I think it's just an interesting question of like curatorship as well. What is the role of curators in such systems? Is it about deciding upon a great program, finding the right artists, or is it more like taking care, making sure that everyone feels welcome in the space they're entering? That kind of, in these sorts of festivals, it kind of shifts the focus on something else, I had the feeling. Yeah, Hoffnung 3000, the platform is still used until today. It's been used at Documenta, actually. Like, there was a whole town running on it for 100 days, the Zukunftsdorf. Anti-University in London and the Anarchist Book Fair, they use it to organize themselves since 3 years. Yeah, other things like the Anti-Colonial Month in Berlin. I think what is interesting is also, like, again, a decentralized platform fits to a decentralized organization. So that, you know, it doesn't, like, it has to come together. Like, obviously the Anarchist Book Fair and the Anti-University, they are already distributed in the way they operate. So to them, this sort of platform fits very well. Yeah, little bit more like, I hope I don't talk too long now, sorry, I don't have a time. Yeah, maybe like to close slowly, like, so this is like, you know, like different sorts of platforms being hosted on different computers locally, in the cloud, on someone's server. And then there is also this idea of sharing infrastructure, like, you know, giving like access to each other's computers, creating networks of support, of infrastructure for each other. And one good example is the Fediverse. Maybe you heard about Mastodon. This is basically like a Twitter alternative, and it's hosted on community infrastructure. So there's lots of servers standing around in the world, each of them maintained by different sorts of groups with different politics, some of them also like, yeah, doubtful. But this is also how it is in real life. It's not different. But also really, really cool groups. And yeah, what I like about it is it's a mode of sharing. It's a mode of sharing infrastructure together with others, like locally, decentralized, but shared. And the Fediverse is, I don't know, like I would say like a very beautiful example of many, many communities like co-sharing a common platform, but still having all the power, like, and all the means to shape it the way they want it to be. It's decentralization on many layers. So decentralization you can understand like from different perspectives. Like decentralized in terms of like, you know, you're geographically like dispersed in different places. It can be technically decentralized. So is it like truly decentralized? Is everything running through one server, or is it running through, you know, a network of 100 computers? If you turn one off, the system is not affected. That's like technical decentralization, but also decentralized maybe in the way of representing the data. You know, like if you think about moderation, this is one thing, but also just like visually representing. If you think about MySpace in the good old times, you know, like when you could change the color of your MySpace page, that was in a way decentralization. Like it was decentralizing like the way you represent your page, not having one central identity. Fediverse is like that. In Fediverse, you all have access to the same data, but you change the way you represent it. Like everyone can build an app which will represent the data however you want it to be represented. And that's an interesting concept. Secure Scuttlebutt is another like social media platform, which is even more radical in decentralization. Like there it's really peer-to-peer. So not federated like the Fediverse, but actual like device-to-device communication. You see like my connections panel in my Secure Scuttlebutt client has a Bluetooth icon, so I can literally like connect to Jan's telephone and we replicate data with each other. Like it was developed by a group which was also very much concerned about sailing. So they were on sailing boats all the time and didn't have internet for many weeks. But they still wanted to publish data into the network, even though they're not connected to the internet. So, you sit on the boat, you write your message, take some pictures of your boat, upload it on your phone. It stays on your phone, and then 2 weeks later, you finally have internet, and you're gonna sync up with the others in the network. They propagate the changes further to the other people's smartphones, and then this is how you make a social network. It just maybe takes a month until everyone sees your post. Yeah, this is like local first software. Local first in the sense of like you create the data on your device. You're not dependent on any sort of global internet connection, global like sort of networked infrastructure. Yeah, that's cool. Also interesting in terms of local first in a social way, like we had lots of discussions today around global politics, about relationships between like how we are perceived from the outside, these sorts of struggles. I think local first is like some sort, at least for me, like some sort of like guideline. It's like if I struggle with like global things, I look around me and see how have we been doing things since a long time here on the street, with the people here. I think this is like, like this is always a good place to start from, like cook together and meet locally in the place you are. Yeah, so I don't know, like for me, like somehow like technically this resembles like an idea I have also. Peer-to-Panda, this is a little bit what I've been working on for the last year. This is a protocol, a peer-to-peer protocol as well. It's very similar to Secure Scuttlebutt or the Fediverse, which I just showed you. It's not blockchain. One has to always say that when mentioning peer-to-peer. It's a weird space, like very small space, not many people know about. Local first software, basically. This is basically a way for other people to build platforms on top of that, which follow the same like sort of idea of local first software. We want to build the next Hoffnung 3000 platform on top of that. So it will be a software for organizing of collectives or festivals, but in a truly peer-to-peer manner. So really like from phone to phone, from phone to servers to local devices. An experiment with that mode. And then lastly, maybe this is also an invitation. If you're interested in these topics, we got offered a space in Berlin, which is really crazy news. So you're very much welcome to participate or come and try to shape the space together, because we're right at the beginning and we're still figuring out what we're gonna do. One thing is clear: it will be about collective practice around computers, maybe with some sort of residency program attached to it, where we invite other collectives into the space. So far, this is like the Peer-to-Panda gang and the Hoffnung 3000 gang, and March International, which is a journal for art and strategy, with Sarita together. You're gonna hear more about it. It doesn't have a name yet. This is literally like, you're the first ones to hear about it actually. So yeah, just saying it. If you can talk to me later or send me an email. And yeah, here I close, and this is like maybe just a reminder. Infrastructure is, like, take care of your digital infrastructure. It's important. It's political. It is a thing, and if you struggle with like capitalism and the big evil AIs and whatever, then host your own server. It's not, like it's possible, and people are there to help you. Maintenance is horrible. It's like cleaning up your apartment. No one wants to do it. It's very uncool. So we should give some love to people who maintain infrastructure. We know they exist, and yeah, this is just a shout out to all the server admins doing it for us. Okay, thank you.
Hey everybody, we're gonna go to the beginning. So thank you for the invitation to Next Festival. My name is Moisés Horta Valenzuela, also known as Exorcismos, and today I'm gonna mostly talk about my own artistic practice, since I think it's the best thing I can talk about, and then you can extrapolate upon these topics of community and power, which is something that I think about, and especially it resonates a lot with the first part of the panel today, where they were discussing this idea of what does it mean to be somehow autonomous or create your own aesthetics that are not necessarily informed by the West, or this kind of discourse or this kind of struggle between traditionalism and global capitalism of the West. How to negotiate that. So I do that a lot in my own practice. So I'm a musician, mostly working in computer music, electronic music. I'm hailing from Tijuana, Mexico, which is a very interesting geopolitical place, since you live between the empire and you live between, Mexico, which is like the backyard of the empire. And this is an interesting place also because culturally you get the newest Western advances, blah, 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 but also you live within the context of tradition. And this is part of the context of the city and the context that I grew up in. As Exorcismos, it's a continuation of a project. It started off as a side project for my former band. So I was playing in a band, which was explicitly that. We were trying to create a sound of music, electronic music, that could only exist in this region. So we were mixing a lot of the traditional aspects of music, folk music, but also not presenting it into this idea of like, oh, we're trying to go into this purist past, right? Tradition always changes, and we were presenting it in a way that was a bit more like tradition is also something that's in decay, and it's in decay because of globalization or like normalization of culture. So it was quite political in this way. I was in this band for 6 years before moving to Berlin, and actually I have a personal experience with the Goody Pal because he was kind of the catalyst that kind of brought me into Europe, which I don't really agree with a lot of his ideas, and I also don't agree with like stuff that he said, and I think is very insensitive, but still an interesting character in electronic music, kind of like the last genius for some people, which I think is total bullshit, but Anyway, so just to start off the talk, I'm going to start off with what does it mean to address decoloniality and computing from the author Syed Mustafa Ali. So why am I talking about computing? Because we're talking about computer music and we're talking about electronic music. So we're engaged with technologies, as Andreas said, we're engaged with interfaces and we're engaged with tools that come with specific biases and come with specific ways about thinking about music as a substance or as a human endeavor that usually are developed in the centers of the world, in the West or whatever. But there is a way to kind of resist or at least to reflect on that. So I attempt to kind of not abide, and this is not a dogma, and this is not something that can be applied as is. This is one approximation. And this is something I really want to stress about my work, that these are gestures towards decolonial gestures in the field of computer music and artificial intelligence. So Firstly, considering your geopolitical and body political orientation when designing, building, researching, and engaging with computing phenomena, and also embrace the decolonial option, as the author calls it, as an ethic. So basically decentering the status quo and thinking beyond music or beyond whatever computing phenomena you're building, as how can you make an alternative to what, let's say, big tech is doing when designing new tools for electronic music and so on and so forth. So I guess this goes to my ongoing research question: what do new sonic technologies potentiate when we engage with them critically, non-hegemonically, and from a decolonial point of view? Of course, there's many decolonialities depending on the context, but essentially it's a very anti-colonialist approach. So the first work I want to talk about is called Nahualtia Tlatzotzonali, which means shape-shifting musician. And this is one of the latest pieces that I've presented in Berlin as part of the Berliner Gesellschaft for New Music exhibition around new technologies and Web3 and whatnot. The piece itself is a series of 13 locked groups that emerge from the actual visual data of the piece. These pieces were created from a neural network that was trained on a self-curated and self-researched data set scraped from mostly social media on talismans and indigenous instruments from the region of Mexico, specifically from central Mexico. And this approach wanted to decenter the idea of AI music to try to go beyond whatever bias or musical bias or compositional bias that you have when composing with these sort of technologies. So going beyond any sort of like Western 12-tone structure, it's pure synthesis, but the synthesis is coming from a visual aspect. So it becomes this kind of holistic blurring between the sound and the image. And this is some of the interfaces that I built for this project. So it's using a generative neural network built by myself. And I also try to work with building new interfaces in order to kind of unlock these, potentially new aesthetics. We can see a little video of it here in action. I think it's the one on Twitter. Yeah. So this is the work in action. So essentially, I mean, to get a bit technical, the RGB data or the visual data is being transformed into sound and then being style transferred into through a generative neural network. Is it possible to turn on the? Music in between this small line of what you would normally call music and noise. I'm very interested in this blurry border, or try to destroy this border between the two. So this was this one piece. The next work, which is I see it as an artwork, but also as a tool-making endeavor to allow musicians and non-coders to work with generative neural networks through a very easy-to-use, albeit quite esoteric interface called Semilla. And this software is built by myself, it's self-built, and it's been using different types of neural synthesis during the phases. This is the early prototype. And I take the reference of the seed, which is a concept that usually you work in when working with generative neural networks, as a way to generate from this multi-dimensional space that has been learned by the machine based on a huge amount of data. I like this idea of tools that are a bit uncontrollable, especially in the field of artificial intelligence, since the history of AI and robotics always has these roots towards control and slavery, right? You want the machines to do our bidding. So taking a totally different turn, I wanted to create an instrument using these kind of technologies that is a bit uncontrollable and a bit unpredictable, and that you can never really grasp what it can do, since this multi-dimensional space is a bit beyond our human grasp. So this is a small video of the first version. I think we can. So these spots of these sliders are representing the latent space dimensions, basically an array of floating point numbers. And each one of these arrangements will generate a different sound. This was the first version of Semilla. Currently, there is a new version which I guess brings me a bit closer to the top of the community and power. So this instrument now is working in real time, and currently it's an ongoing project called Mutualism, where I'm collaborating with about 15 musicians who are getting each one of them curated their own musical data sets of what best represents their musical sound. So about hours and hours of music curated by the artist and then trained by me. They get their AI mutual back as a way, you can think about this AI mutual as the neural network embedded with each of the artist's essence. And subsequently, the collaboration will consist in everybody using this AI mutual, but as well as using everybody of the collaborators' AI mutual in order to generate new music, which becomes interesting when you think that you can pass sounds through the network, and the network would output sound that is very similar to whatever data it was trained on. So thinking about this, the project of Mutualismo, which I didn't include in the presentation since it's ongoing, is a way to kind of become sonic networks that blur our identities as artists, as electronic music artists, from one into another, no? Creating hopefully a plural kind of dialogue. Obviously, the idea is for the artists to incorporate Semilla into their own workflow. So I'm not trying to just force all the artists to just use this tool. So going back into the idea of community, I want to present this project called OIR, which is questioning what is the sound of human AI co-creation in the age of huge data. And especially when scenes and music culture are essentially hosted on platforms like YouTube, right? So what does it mean for a whole electronic music culture such as Hoa Berlin to be hosted and archived in these big tech platforms, where potentially they can also be used as training material to optimize for some kind of market, or to optimize for, you know, whatever bottom line the big tech platform. So this project went kind of viral since I was engaging in training an arrangement of neural networks with all this archive. I wanted to explore what was the common patterns, both visual and sonically, and also to question this idea of automation and what is the role going to change for human artists in the face of total automation of culture, no? So this becomes a generative project, which maybe some people have seen it. And the idea was to, no, it's I think this one. Yeah. So the idea was to create a full DJ set in the most autonomous way possible, as a kind of provocation to what the future could be when, you know, Spotify, YouTube is already training on this data, right? There's some danceable stuff there, I promise. But I'm also interested in these errors that are produced and these glitches produced by the machine as sort of like failures, and to show these imperfections from essentially curve fitting, like huge amounts of data, huge amounts of patterns and styles of music channeled through these systems, right? So I guess one of the reasons to use this specific channel is because, I mean, there was so many DJ sets I also played in this place. So I'm also in the data set, but also I think it's interesting to see this normalization of the DJ, right? Like you see the dress kind of forming this like black attire, mostly white. You know, so you see this analysis as generated by the machine, because these are just like the normalization patterns within this huge amount of information. And also, I think it's quite poetic to have, you know, the AI or the neural network DJ sets. So it becomes a bit abstract. Another project I want to talk about, also dealing with the topic of this tension between Western and non-Western aesthetics arising in an artwork, is Okachiwali, which means future, where I trained a generative neural network, open source generative neural network, on a huge data set of the style of tribal music, which is a style of music that I myself was engaged in the band Los Macuanos, but also gained this viral status in Mexico around 2010, and just basically became a new kind of electronic music, a kind of folk music that was mostly distributed online for free between artists. The sample packs were distributed for free. So this became kind of like a scene. It's still like a style of music that was later adopted in the global bass community. But I have which I have very deep links or very personal links to. So this data set was curated by a YouTube channel called Word Tribal, which basically they capture the best tracks from many years. And for their anniversary, they released this 40 gigabytes compilation. And I'm talking 40 gigabytes of really low quality MP3, so you can imagine how much music is in there. And I approached them and I was telling them I was doing a residency at the time, curated by DataBots, which is this other generative neural network duo, mostly doing black metal. AI music residency, what does it mean? They basically gave me a bunch of computing power. And this was during the pandemic, so I found it interesting, and the question of like, can this system that is designed in Silicon Valley reproduce or kind of, you know, create new kinds of music in order to create a machine that brings this style of music into the future by sheer quantity. So the album is a 60-track album, which I released for free. But also the weights, or like the trained neural network, is released for free, so people can generate their own composition. So I guess we can play the first one. So these kind of structures, I think, is quite interesting as a musician, as a producer of this style of music, because it's quite stochastic, but still it follows some kind of like inherent logic in the system. And I mean, it's also the sheer quantity of music that you can produce. Cool. So this project is open for free download. If anybody wants to download, it's on my Bandcamp. Yeah. I guess the last project I want to talk about today is Nel Tocón in Cuicatl, which was a bit more of a poetry piece, audiovisual poetry using an assemblage of different neural networks. I guess the central idea was to have, so the data set is comprised of these talismans that are currently existing in the National Anthropology Museum, both in Mexico, but also in different parts of Europe. I thought it poetic to have the images of these objects kind of tell the story in a very abstract way about colonization in Mexico and how this process happened and how they can kind of communicate back this process. So this piece is an assembly of audio, visual, and textual neural networks to form a kind of iterative, generative, audiovisual performance, which we can see. I think there was another. Yeah. This was presented in Ars Electronica and also in Sao Paulo Multiplicidad Festival in 2021. guys, the internet is kind of weird. But so for this piece, I also used the this image. Sorry, I don't know where my presentation is. This image to sound technique, which I actually was pioneered in this work, to kind of have the images kind of talk directly from the data. Actually, this is the last piece I will talk about. So this was my album, Transfiguración, released in 2020. That was composed entirely using a deep learning algorithm, using style transfer. So I was trying to explore and create this link, this artificially created link between between a musician of Mexico that was quite popular, or maybe not so popular, 1970s, which was Antonio Cepeda, using this album, which was recorded primarily as an acoustic album, using pre-Hispanic Mexica instruments, mostly percussive and mostly wind instruments. The thing that I want to stress is that this album from 1970s is not it's not a traditional music, or let's say it's not ritualistic music directly from indigenous people. This is already a syncretic approach to music, even in 1970s. So this is what I want to stress, because a lot of people are saying like, okay, decolonization, I've gotten some criticisms about like, oh, you want to return to this sort of pure past. This doesn't exist. I'm more interested in these syncretic approaches, but also how do you balance the power or level out the power of influence by undermining certain Western structures and putting other structures on top of them, but obviously not ignoring them. So this work was training this album called Templo Mayor into my own style of music. So the other data set was my own music from the past 5 years up until that point. And so it became kind of like, as the cover you can see, a kind of mirror image of this same album, that you can play both of them together and literally hear what this algorithm translated into, and they can perfectly coexist. So the past and the present can perfectly coexist in this kind of composition. Yeah. I think.
Oh, the first day that we signed up for Monday.
You can hear actually both the target sound, the source sound from Antonio Cepeda, and the neural network generated sound simultaneously, which is kind of difficult to grasp. which one is which, and that was kind of the point. And I think, yeah, thank you so much for your attention, and I guess we're gonna jump into the panel.
And now I would like to invite the other panelists to join us. Yeah, so also to the audience, please feel free to ask, like even if the space is like somehow like structured that there is like maybe possible hierarchies, you can really ask anything you want. This should be like totally like non-hierarchical space. I would like to start with the first question. It's kind of also like touching your presentation. If you make your living in music, the job you have today will probably not exist in 5 to 10 years. Was a tweet published like a few weeks ago on Pitchfork, yeah, basically announcing that the current progress and development in the AI will replace or swallow up the electronic producers. Yes, and I would like to ask you, like, what's your position on this?
I don't really think it's going to replace. Maybe it's definitely going to replace some type of creative work, and especially like ads or very like generic kind of music. This is already very possible in a very high quality with neural networks. But the essence of the human or the creativity, it's not something that can be replaced, because like as a human you can use these systems and then incorporate them into your workflow, and this is what I'm mostly interested in. Maybe, you know, flirting a bit with this idea of automation, but more in a conceptual way. But I don't really think it's going to replace or create, you know, like any kind of creative endeavor that requires some kind of like novelty, or, you know, like I say, it's going to create generic music, and it's like perfectly at creating generic music. But if you're not, yeah, if you're a creative artist and you don't need to feel threatened, I think these kind of articles are very nice to get clicks. I think that's like.
Yeah, well, we know from the history of electronic instruments, we know certain moments where people panicked, like, is this going to replace us? Are we going to starve from now on? Be it Telharmonium or be it a BBC radiophonic workshop, or like, are the orchestras gonna die now? Or so I think this is just another one, and I think this is a great start of a debate: who's an artist and what an artist should do. And I think we all live in kind of a myth of originality and authenticity. So this is kind of like a start of demythicizing this kind of like genius that is creating these ultra authentic or ultra original stuff, because all of these like producers workshops or producers teams are AIs anyway. They are just analyzing what's trendy, they are analyzing what's popular, and then they are creating something like that. So I don't find anything when it comes to like when it gets to the hands of the, like, let's say big capital, or that, then I see a big problem where but we can discuss this later, but having this and using this is not going to replace musicians. Or
you said everything.
Yes, it will probably replace like stock music or library music, but not art.
Actually, I think the Pitchfork comment was actually some kind of like product placement for some Holly Herndon web page, yeah. but still, like coming back to this, and when I was listening to the set you made for the Horror, it wasn't sounding, like such differently than the rest of the Horror catalog. So I want to ask you, like, is there any particular reason why you decide to pick the YouTube channel of Horror? Like, they have these like really like sterile aesthetics. The things looks somehow the same always, etc.
I mean, I think one of the like logic behind it is because I've been living in Berlin for the past 5 years, and this is kind of like it became some kind of like institution in the techno culture. So I wanted to see, just because the sheer amount of like the size of the archive that they have, it's perfect for these kind of systems. Of course, the tracks that are playing in this like piece, in my piece, in the network generated piece, are also cherry picked by me. So it's not that it's completely automized. So there's still an aesthetic choice in, which is kind of like the shift with generative neural networks, that instead of actually engaging with the media or with the creation, you're more of a curator in some kind of way. So your aesthetic preferences, like we can all say like, okay, we're going to train a data set on like, I don't know, electronic music, but everybody's perspective on electronic music and taste is going to be completely different. And just by the fact that an individual is curating that data is not going to be the same. Of course, if it's, following the logic of a think tank or something, there has to be some kind of consensus. But when individuals engage with this technology, it's like maybe the artifacts of the algorithm come through, and that's the thing that kind of get normalized, let's say. But the selection of the data is completely arbitrary. It's totally dependent on the person.
Yeah, well, also like to continue more about the software, like in the way as I understood the software, like I understood it primarily as a cultural formation, like that is that like software reflects on the cultural traditions, mechanics, social, political, and economical conditions of the place in which it's created. Yeah, like there's a nice example, like philosopher and cultural theorist Byung-Chul Han recognized the disciplinarian roots of Taoism in the way AI technologies have been applied in countries including China and South Korea in the pandemic context. When thinking about software and how it navigates our work or thinking, should we take into account the cultural background in which it was developed? And if so, like how to avoid it or like how to decentralize from it? Maybe.
Well, yeah, we've got few problems around synths as well, or around the electronic music technology, I would say now, because it drew from the communication technology during the Second World War, for example. So I think it's good to have this discussion where the technologies are coming from, or how some of the technologies are used as well, and maybe trying to somehow reclaim it or shift it, but then you always have to somehow talk against the status quo and some of the powers that will always be bigger or stronger than you. And I think just like one or two musicians can't do anything with it, but like I like to have this conversation even during our intro to synths, to know where these technologies are coming from, and also where are they built, manufactured now, who's manufacturing them. Or, for example, there's an interesting essay called Namal Fingers by one of the originally Czech academics that is talking about like there are women in music technologies, but they are in the factories building the synths, and they are not recognized, for example. So there's a lot of issues around the technology, not only the history and the cultural background, but also like now how we are building it, and why don't we do anything with it.
I think a good example is like, Moisés' work. So I'm saying something nice. I don't know, like if you look at data sets, like machine learning data sets, it's like always Beethoven data sets, Bach data sets. And I think this is, like I think just creating alternative data sets is already like a great contribution and a way to shift this sort of like, I don't know, hegemony. Yeah, I think it's cool. I think it's cool. You collect data. It's lots of work. Push it up and even do it in license free. I think this is exactly the way we should do it. Another thing is whenever you develop software, make it open source and give it a good license. I think this is, for example, my criticism with Holly Herndon. There's all this talk about like, big talk about machine learning and big talk about how we should be like, like radical, and then they never publish the code of their work. And I don't get that part. For me, it's quite important. Like if you talk like that, make it public, share it with everyone, and everyone should have the right to like get better tools than the ones we get from Google. Maybe they just used what Google gave to them. I don't know, but we never know. I think this is like an important aspect. Create data sets, publish your code.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. I mean, I think the problematic thing that I found with working with current like generative neural network technologies is that within the process of creating a data set, you're already forced into the logic of extraction. And this is kind of built in, right? So I'm extracting this archive from YouTube with like a very kind of gray area thing, all these tracks have some kind of copyright. And this is something that's barely getting talked about, especially in the AI image community, visual community, that artists are being, you write a picture of this and that in the style of this and that artist. So, okay, the system doesn't actually sample directly from the artist, but it needs the data. Where do they get this data? Just from the internet without paying that kind of copyright. And this is very difficult to manage because it's like the research is kind of based on that, and the logics of like status quo AI, let's say, is based on just taking this data from the internet, maybe buying it, but never showing the profits to the actual producers of the data, which I think is like the big important shift that has to happen, which I'm trying to address with this Mutualismo project, where the artists are curating their own data, but not only that, they are getting back their model along with the tool that I designed, and they hold the ownership and the creative ownership to whatever they want to do with their trained model. And I think this is the big shift. It's like we're already in the data set of Facebook, but yeah, okay, let's own our data, these regulations on data ownership. But I think there has to be like one more step into saying, okay, these trained neural networks are trained on this data. You should also have equity into them. And I think this is kind of like where it's going, hopefully, to make it a bit more equitable for artists and producers of culture.
Thank you. Staying by the software, where's the position of the author in like contemporary software? Like I'm meaning this, but like you have like this, the whole like theory of like remix. Also, the software is like oftenly just like taking from a tradition. Also, even like from analog media, remixing them, etc., etc. Then you are in some kind of interface. For example, I don't know, you are in Ableton, which is also like representing mostly the Western music heritage, or like the Western music way of composing, and you are there in like these like many spaces that are already predefined, and you are somehow navigating through it. And where is the position where you are approaching the thing, where you are the author of the thing, and where you are just like being interactive with the interface?
Just quickly on this idea, I think every technology has its kind of cultural bias, like you were saying, quoting Chun Julian. And also Yu Hua, another philosopher of technology, talks about this fragmenting of the future, right? So every culture has their own culture, and these cultures produce technology that are very useful for specific things, but we're living in a time where we're living in some kind of monotechnological paradigm, right, where like binary computing basically became the norm, and we kind of have to accept that, no? So it's already kind of embedded into the current metaphors of like digital technology. So I think it's a matter of really reconsidering what we think of as technology, not necessarily computing, or even thinking about computing beyond, or maybe digging deep into the history that, you know, there's ternary systems and etc., and maybe incorporating them into future technologies that are not necessarily based on the computer, you know, as we know it now. Maybe in the future it will be different stuff. So yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong, inherently wrong, of like somebody producing a technology based on their culture. This is exactly what's happening with Ableton or any kind of music technology. It's just like acknowledging that this is not a universal technology. I think this is the shift that kind of needs to happen.
I think also I'm thinking about, like, for this to change, you will have to change the Western capitalist society, because like for me working in education, it's important to start changing things there, because if you don't know about any other music theory worlds, any other cultures, some people won't be able to hear differences from other music cultures, then there won't be any demand, or like people won't be able to work with different tools. So then, you know, you have to start changing this in the education, but of course, you know, that's much higher than we can, you know, reach. So how can you like force this system to change when there will be some forced demand, or like forced systems that will tell you like this is where we work with the Western music theory, this is only thing we know, and this is what we built our instruments in. So it's, yeah, difficult, but education can do a lot.
Yeah, yes, because you can actually quite easily do like non-Western, non-12 tone music in Ableton, but the interface really steers you the other way. So you'd have to know what to look for, or what to build yourself essentially inside Ableton.
Any question from the audience? Okay, so I will continue. Here I want to connect also to my experience from Drawing Grupa and from the Documenta. Like, to be open and really accessible to everyone is also about the language or interface, whether it's like a digital code or words. And I think especially in the fields of art, it's very easy to jump into this, let's say, artsy newspeak. When communicating with others or building a shared experience or a collectives is for you an easy and accessible language, something worth working on?
Sorry, the last part I didn't.
If it's for you like easy and accessible language, like something that is worth working on.
Yeah. Yes, for sure. I think there's lots of like I don't know, passive aggressiveness and how like digital art is communicated and visualized. I don't know. I often feel not invited just by the imagery, just by the imagery, like how like somehow this like doomy, techy, the world will go down tomorrow sort of aesthetics. It looks super complicated and so on. Of course, this is like something. It is complicated and or complex. There's complex systems. I understand like where it comes from, but I think this is also maybe a little bit what I said with the role of the curator, as someone who is like, well, I don't know. Like I think there's like there is a certain. We create spaces. These spaces have certain, like codes, visual codes, tools we are using, and I think like to at least identify one person in the room which can like take care of the outside and try to bring these people in and try to give them some introduction into that space. It's not about like learning everything and being able to hack away and be a coder. It's not about this. It's like just making people feel welcomed, like seen. I think these are like practices like from running a space, from like organizing events, and I think this is something which can be also translated in how we present ourselves, what texts we choose to write, what images we pick, and there is something like easy language. I mean, and that, I don't know, can be, what can also be like a way to start with and then go deeper afterwards. Yeah, so I think like in general, I think it's like something I would like to see more, like some how we frame these things, how we talk about them can be, yeah, I don't know, more inviting. I don't know if I can say that better than that, yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, many thoughts. I think for once, it's like, it's a mix of many things. I think first of all, there's lots of money in that space. So it's the same with Ethereum or like cryptocurrencies. There's shitloads of money in that space currently. So where there's money, there's suddenly lots of movements, lots of research being conducted, lots of funding being allocated, which of course also reflects in cultural funding. Wherever you look, there's an AI residency right now. Wherever you look, there's an AI topic on the festival. NFTs here, NFTs there. And I think that creates just lots of like very, very fast movement, very little reflection. Just because there's money, and I understand it's a cultural sector, it's it's precarious. Festivals need to like be relevant to the funding bodies and whatnot. All of that. So I think this is one big factor. I think many people do things inside of this because they don't have a choice, like literally speaking, like in a way. Like all my like artist friends who were good artists suddenly have to make NFTs. To be relevant, poor them. They made good art before that as well. So I think this contributes also to just very little reflection about actually what is going on, and that of course like builds up more boundaries of people around it trying to understand what is happening. Like I mean, like I think this is how you can look at like cryptocurrencies from the outside. What the fuck is happening? It's completely crazy because it is. It is really crazy. It's a bubble, and of course, yeah, this is one thing. And then I think the other thing is, as I said it before, I think there's a lack of like platforms which, or like where are spaces where we face technology. I think this is the next question. Where are these places? It's like startups, like this is what we see. This like our like commercial devices we have in our hands, and the commercial platforms, the exploitative, extractivist platforms we're using. I mean, we just saw YouTube. They're directly showing advertisement. This is the world we're living in. So this is like technology, like by default. And what's the alternative to that? It's like the art festival. Not sure. Art festivals, I don't know. Like my experience, at least, is like, there's an AI lab, let's hack on AI for 2 days, and try something out. And then there is a symposium, which is great, of course, but I don't know, like, where is like the more like, you know, like where are the places where we can meet every day and, you know, like actually like work on the things over a longer time, and it's not so short and pointy. I think this is like something which is missing. There is a couple of places in the world which do that, but they're like really very sparse. So I think it's also like representation of technology as a cultural good, which is a little bit more like more than just commercial and more than just like an art piece which we can present for 10 minutes. Yeah. I had a friend now, like I talked with about this space in Berlin we want to start, and they said we have to like bring in other people, we have to make yoga, we have to you know, like we have to like bring in artists and so on. I said no. This is exactly the problem. We have to like change the way we see technology. We shouldn't blur it with like mixing it up because computers are boring. They're not. It's just that like there is no space for it to look at it the other way around. Yeah. Sorry. No, I talked very long. But like this and many other things, I think. But yeah.
Maybe from our point of view of the library, I thought that the library could be the place where we could come together and work, you know, long term, being meeting regularly and building something. But then you also find out that because of the nature of the world we live in, most of the people don't have the capacity to go out and work on something they really like to explore, because they have to get some money to live, because the cost of living is very high, and you know, other reasons as well. But to talk maybe about how to bring the technology closer to someone who would say like, oh, I hate technology, or like, I'm afraid to work with technology, because that's what we explored with Trigger and still explore. It's just like broadening the narratives around the technology and just allowing people or encourage people to work with the technology the way they never seen it around them before, for example. So it's also about like creating workshops, how to work with Ableton the way the producers don't want you to work with the Ableton Live, you know, so like making the mistakes, like just saying that, oh, this fancy object, this fancy pricey synth is so amazing, and some producers told me about it, I saw some tutorial about it. No, we can create a little bit of a different story around this synth. We can say it's a normal object that we can explore, you know. So I think part of the one big barrier around the technology is that some people like to create these amazing, exclusive kind of vibe around them, like Robert Moog, who wanted to build these Rolls Royces of synths and stuff like that. So like we have to kind of break these things and say like, no, maybe we can tell the story differently, maybe we can use it differently. Part of the hacking scene, you know, no.
I guess just to add quickly to that, I didn't mention, but I didn't really study computer science or anything like that. I'm mostly picking up everything as a self-taught artist on all these fronts. So there is a possibility to do that. And it takes a while, and I owe a lot to other artists who enable workshops that are quite accessible, especially if you don't want to go to the academic route. It's just, I mean, I guess post-pandemic, it's kind of slowly starting again, because before it was like, you know, a lot of people getting into the room and helping each other, especially with technical stuff, you know, getting stuff to work, you know, just having somebody who's a little bit more experienced changes the whole vibe of the room, because then they can kind of offer their experience. And I guess like after kind of learning this stuff, I've been trying to also organize workshops for other artists in the future to kind of give this knowledge that I picked up along the way, and you know, keep giving back, you know, in a sort of way. So it's not totally impossible, and maybe I'm saying it as very easy because maybe I'm more like technically minded person, but I think, it's possible, and I think it should be encouraged more with these alternative independent spaces.
Maybe go back to you, Mary, because it's also, I think many of us just experience this like inaccessibility of like selling, let's say, some kind of knowledge, especially when it comes to digital technology or making electronic music. I was many times on workshops where there was this almost a guru presenting like something totally inaccessible to people in the group that were like kind of connecting to what was being presented, so they completely like overtake the space. And the only thing after a few hours that I got was like even bigger fear or like anxiety of the technology itself. And I think you are avoiding it like very nicely in the Prague Scene Library. So maybe you can talk about like how to build mechanisms or like how to build up the structures that are open for listening, experimenting, but also failing, etc.
I think you mentioned something that I experienced a lot before I started doing workshops. That was exactly this. I called it two IT guys presenting music, and that was, and it was horrible. And I thought like, yes, that's another example of why I don't belong to this community, or like that's another, proof of I can't work with the technology. But then I was thinking about it, and it can be done differently, but I think that the source of these ways of presenting the technology is also the anxiety of those people that you might see as gurus or the last geniuses, but some of the people are so scared to share their practices that I think maybe they just try to look, very confident, but of course, sometimes it's annoying, sometimes it's very scary, because then you have no idea what they talk about, and it's sadly the nature of the music technology, I would say forums and scenes, I don't want to say scenes, but probably forums, I can say, that are so full of sexism and disrespectful remarks, and if you ask the wrong question, you are bombarded with harsh comments and stuff like that. So and then you have to kind of start talking about it with people that can support you and experience the same thing. That's what we did with the Trigger. We started talking about it, and suddenly there was a flood of stories and problems, and we found out that we really share the same problems and same concerns. And then from it, you can make fun of it. You can point out, if you have the support, you can point out and call out these things, because if you don't have the support, you usually can't call out the things, because you will be flooded with the other guys that love the sexist remark, and they love to share the sexist memes of synths and women and stuff like that. So you have to that's the role of the community as well. You have to have some kind of support and feel that you are not alone, to be able to start just getting in and maybe changing some of the things, maybe having the dialogue with the people, and then maybe also understand that they are anxious as well, and that maybe even they would like to change the nature of the patriarchal racist system. And but it's a long journey. If anyone wants to comment.
Thank you. But let's keep on that. Like maybe you can share more in deep your experiences, how it was in the beginning and how it is now with the Prague Scene Library, or with the ways how to build an educational space that is really open and accessible to everyone.
I can't say that we are the welcoming and respectful space that I would like to see. I can't for example, we can't provide or we can't say we are a safe space or something like that. We are trying
Sorry
to,
for
we
interrupting
try
you,
to,
you can,
yeah.
but you are still reflecting
Yeah.
on that. I
Yeah,
think
we
this is also
reflect on that,
important.
but I have to also, yeah, I have to, time to time, I have to reflect on like, we are not there yet because, because it's not on us mostly, so we can be building a small circle, but a lot of the times it happens that people just come and are very confused with something like that is very normal to me. So for example, people would be asking like, so this space is only for women? And I'm like, no, that's not the case. But sometimes people assume from social media or from what we talk about that there would be some problem or there would be some controversy, or they pick a book from a shelf and say like, oh no, communism for kids, oh my God, I have to leave, like this is weird, this is getting weird. So we have to slowly be like talking about these things and writing about those things, even though I don't like to present the library as something like these are the rules of the space and only these people can enter this space. Like, we just want to be as welcoming as possible. And of course, sometimes it happens that there will be some sexist remarks, there will be some problems, and we have to somehow deal with it, and just the best thing is to be open about it and to be talking about as many people as possible. The thing is that it might get complicated when you realize that a lot of the times it's about talking with many people separately, not because when we try to put together a bigger group, sometimes it's not comfortable for everyone, and sometimes people get very uncomfortable with seeing that other people have much bigger problems than they have. For example, that we have been dealing with it, and some people were like, I just don't know what to do now because I see you and now I see that I'm so privileged, and suddenly you have this like circle of confusion. So sometimes it's just better to have like smaller groups and then just have a reading circle time to time and then have a synth workshop. So this is kind of what we are trying to balance, because we always have to navigate the knowledge that is in the group, like also the knowledge that was provided to us. Some people were not so privileged as I was, that I had many vinyls at home because my father was a musician and had a lot of books on arts. So we try to have these things available, and we also try to question like what knowledge counts, and we try to be like respectful to even someone who really don't know anything about, I don't know, feminism or about technology. So we like to be like, let's explore this together, because we can have a mutual, we can learn together like from each other, even though, and that's the thing that education usually don't do. Like, it's usually not a dialogue or multilogue, it's usually this like hierarchical thing, like the bank system of like, I will tell you what you should know, I will tell you how you should behave. So like we try to not impose, but of course we have some of our opinions that we like to share and talk about why this mattered to us. So mutual exchange, collaboration.
Maybe other experiences with building educational spaces?
Talked about the new space you will have.
Yeah, I mean, I can't share too much yet, because I think it's like, we just started with the space. But I think one important part of the place we have is the kitchen. So there will be a kitchen installed. I think every event will start with cooking, not with the event itself. It's kind of a semi-public space, so I think it's lots for groups which will, come and meet and work and talk, and also for them to create a space they need. I talk currently to very different people, and they all have different ideas. and I think so maybe it's different from your mode. It sounds a little bit like you have the same people coming again and again. I think in our case it could probably be that there's very different groups which don't know each other, and they will also not have too much like connection with each other, and for themselves they're gonna create like their own rules, I can imagine. But it's too early maybe.
But maybe like because okay, we are now talking about physical spaces, but for example, like for me, as if I understood it correctly, like Hoffnung 3000 is also like a space that is digital, but it's space for community, for sharing, and building your own structures and platforms. So maybe you can.
Yeah, right. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. This is actually interesting. We learned, of course, from doing that it's that of course it comes with many questions. People come and ask like, what the fuck is going on? And sometimes it's like very nice that they say it. Maybe it's just more like, wow, okay, what is going on? I've never seen something like this before, which can be a nice thing. And very often, but also sometimes, of course, it's like really, okay, I'm lost. And we learned that there has to be a dedicated person and lots of time allocated for these sorts of questions. It's like something one needs to think with, like it's like every time we collaborate with people who want to use the platform, setting it up is easy, and then you have it, and then all the questions come suddenly, like super many questions, and they can all be solved. It just needs time, and this is something to just I think I don't know, like at least like we have to plan with this and have like the person like really being there to answer all of these questions. And then of course like then the next year is less questions, and then at some point all questions are solved. But yeah, I don't know. This is like something we learned from doing it. It's not enough to just put something out there and there it is. But I think with Hoffnung 3000, at least for the first iteration, it was a little bit different setting because we built the platform to go together with the people using it. So it was like a year-long process actually of discourse. Like it was combined with a magazine we published at this time, the Blatt 3000. Since 2014 we did that, and that magazine was kind of like an experiment in self-publishing, like everything gets published. We don't curate the magazine. Was still somehow focused around music discourse, but it also turned very chaotic at one point. But basically, we always used this as a platform to discuss our ideas. This magazine, and then also the release parties, and we had like 4 release parties per year, and they also became a forum for discussing, and sometimes we met outside of that. So the platform didn't come out of nowhere. It was like coming out of this whole discourse, and then with the first festival, lots of publications were made, and lots of events took place to reflect upon this platform. And then we designed a second platform. So the first one was Verantwortung 3000, and then the second one was Hoffnung 3000. And so, at least for the group of people, and it's been like, I don't know, 50 people involved. That was not like, it was not a surprise. But now when we work with external collectives like Anti-University or the Latin American Bloc in Berlin, of course there we realized they have this other situation where it's suddenly something is there. And sometimes they adapt it naturally because they, as I already said, like they already have this mode and they already know their ways. For them, then this is a little bit easier. Yeah.
Thank you. Maybe audience, any questions? Like almost most of your work is happening in collaborative or collective settings, and you are all approaching this collectiveness or the collaborative approach from different perspectives and disciplines. And what I want to ask is why it is important for you to work in such an environment, to be together?
We can start from here. I mean, I guess it's not very apparent in the presentation that I give, but I mean, I come from a music scene, kind of like not necessarily a collective, but a music scene that is grassroots back in Tijuana, like before I started working with machine learning and moved to Berlin. And this, like, I guess part of the success or relevance of the music style and the music that I used to make back in this band was because it was not only one band, it was like, you know, an arrangement of people, an artists, musicians, kind of working in similar conceptual ideas, but totally different perspectives. So, I mean, I owe a lot to that kind of arrangement, and also the ideas that are exchanged within that. It's totally invaluable, you know, it's something that you cannot really, you know, there's not, you know, nobody's in a vacuum, right? Like, that's what I'm trying to say. Maybe right now it's a bit more abstracted, especially post-pandemic situation, that we're kind of like decentralized, or, you know, like, you know, we try to build this collectivity again, like after we were like locked in. But I think it's still like even more relevant now to start thinking about these collective situations, and maybe thinking about new ways of, you know, arrangements that are maybe not presential, to work creatively, or, you know, have some ideas and put them forward. So, like, I guess I just want to position this work as part of like a bigger body of artists that are working around these themes of decoloniality, music technology, especially like Hayam Alami, who's making this tool called Apotome in Lima, that is like experimenting with this transcultural approach to tuning, and specifically what you talked about, like making different tunings that are culturally situated, accessible to electronic musicians. So, I mean, it's also this approach. We're in communication. There's all people in Mexico, different artists working around these same topics. So, I mean, I just see myself part of this bigger network of artists that are kind of approaching stuff in a different way, or trying to.
I think taking it more broadly, I think the individualist culture is dangerous and toxic. So the way we were taught, like, have sharp elbows and just do it, you'll make it, and you'll make it alone, you have to be the best. It's just bullshit. It doesn't work that way. Like, we need each other, mutual help, collaboration. That's something that's central to a lot of books that I love, a lot of theories I love, or like, so, and I like to be with people. I like to play with other women, for example, and it's, you know, sometimes we're like, oh no, there's a gathering of women playing synths, like, should we be afraid or something? Like, can't we be just playing and together and enjoying ourselves? Like, it's not my fault that we are all like pushed to being competition to one another, and it's just something that I hate from when I was a child. I didn't want to compete playing violin. So it's just something that I like to be with people. I'm interested in people. I'm a music journalist, so I'm interested in other music. I want to listen to music. So it's just something that I like to do. I'm interested in other people's worlds, opinions. So just simple as that.
I would, yeah, I would just repeat what you said. So I don't know. At least some parts of it.
I'd love to be, but
But we also got a sign that it's time to finish the panel because of the next program. So maybe last call for a last question from the audience. Okay, so then I will really deeply thank you for your time, for your presentations, and all the amazing and interesting thoughts that we could share all together. And yes, thank you one more time. Thank you also for you being here with us. And let's enjoy the rest of the festival.